Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm going to start a new series here on frame repair, and this is going to be full frames like trucks, Jeeps, some SUVs, stuff like that. So this is going to be just a general overview of what I'm going to be talking about in this series. And there's things you can do with frames, there's things you can't do with these frames. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. People's views have changed over the years about what you can and can't do, so I'm going to try and address most of these issues. Now this here is just a basic diagram of a full-size pickup truck, and they're basically just like a ladder type frame. So one of the biggest misconceptions with truck frames is guys will say that, well, you can be 5, 6, 7 millimeters out. There's a lot of leeway in a truck frame. They're not built that close. And that's not true. You can put these things almost as close to tolerance as you can a unibody car. And I think I've mentioned it before in a video where unibody cars up to 3 millimeters tolerances. And I think what technicians will think is, well, you're allowed 3 millimeters, but I got this point, it's only 5 millimeters, so I'm only 2 millimeters out of spec. That's not the case. You are 5 millimeters out of spec. And truck frames are no different. Usually you can get everything within, I'm going to say 2 millimeters. And a lot of these points you can put them back to 0, 1, 2 millimeters. But what makes these a little bit different is the frame as opposed to suspension mounting points. So you could have a little bit of variance in the frame, but your suspension mounting points need to be pretty much right dead on the money, because that's how the truck, it has to be aligned, it has to track down the road right, it can't wear the tires. So the closer you have the frame to 0, the easier it is to get your suspension points closer. Most of these trucks are not high strength steel. Now there's a few of them that are really tough to straighten. FJ Cruiser, that one is high strength steel. That one is tough to straighten. Jeep Wranglers are tough. They're like trying to straighten out a coil spring. It seems like they'll get bent, they'll go a mile, but trying to get them back is another story. And it can be done, it's just tough. You got to work at them a lot longer. The Nissan Titan, those are a tough one to do. They bend and they don't kink, but they can throw off. And what happens on a truck frame, you don't just get a couple rails bent over. It affects the frame from one end to the other. And like the Nissan Titans, you just have to work a lot harder to get them straight. And it can be done. You might have a few more hours into it. You're going to do more setups as far as the way you're pulling and where you're anchoring and clamping, but they can all be done. If you don't have major kinks in the rails, you know, one area that is known to kink, you get hit right on this rail pretty hard here, and it would buckle in here and kink. And if you've got a good kink in there, there's not much you can do with it because it's boxed in. You can't get to the inside of it. But most of these, they'll bend. It could be 3, 4, 5 millimeters in sway. It could be 3 or 4 in diamond. It could, the height issue, and you can do a lot of bending without kink in the frames. So they are still repairable, and I think a lot of the technicians now are just saying that, well, you can't repair them, it has to have a frame, because they don't want to attempt to repair it, and it may be over their head. And they are complicated, but I hope with this series I can break all this stuff down on procedures and how to work all through this stuff. And the thing is, you can't really just straighten one part of the time. Everything you do, it affects the whole frame when you're pulling. Just like the impact affected the whole frame. So whatever you're doing to a certain section, you have to keep an eye on the whole frame and what is it doing while you're pulling, because it'll twist and rock stuff out of place, and you have to do a lot more anchoring and hold it into position. But it's not all that complicated if you just follow the steps and work from the least amount of damage to the most amount of damage. So, like I said, this is just an overview, and the first, I think the first thing we're going to talk about is just measuring these correctly. But I hope this series will interest some people out there. I've got literally decades of doing full frame work. I can't even count the amount that I've done over the years. And once you learn a few tricks, it'll pretty much apply to every frame you're doing. They're all going to bend about the same, and they're pretty much going to straighten the same if you do them in the right order, the right sequence. So I hope this series will inform you, maybe entertain you, maybe teach you some tricks. Maybe you won't be so intimidated tackling something like this. So if you have some questions or concerns or something you want me to address specifically, leave me a comment. But I hope to cover pretty much everything in this series regarding full frame work. So like I said, I hope you'll stick with me through this, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.